Welcome back, everybody, to the Fantasy Football World Championship Video Showdown, Part 2. I'm your host, Billy Musio, and in this episode, we'll be releasing rounds 4 through 8 in this video showdown. If you've missed Part 1, head on down to the show notes, where you can find all the magicalness that all of these wonderful analysts and sites have put together for this contest. It has been a huge project for them to submit videos and for us to edit. So I am forever grateful for all of their contributions. If you liked what you've seen, please share it on social media. Please give it a like, comment also down for the YouTube algorithm. It definitely helps the show. We hope you enjoy it, and we're about to kick into rounds 4 through 8 right now. Take care.
The 401, I took Breece Hall. Breece Hall is my first running back off the board and the first running back off of the rookie board. Over the last 6 years, all but Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the first running back off of the rookie NFL board, have finished as running back 8 or higher. And getting Breece Hall at running back 16 in this draft at the start of the 4th round, I think is a steal. I'm big in on Breece Hall, not concerned about Ty Johnson or Michael Carter getting passing work. 97th, 98th percentile speed and burst. And I love that he's young and he's going to get a lot of work in this ascending New York Jets offense. So I'm very confident in taking Breece Hall. He might be a steal at the beginning of the 4th round.
This is Pat Fitzmaurice of Fantasy Pros, and with pick 402 in the FFWC Video Showdown, I took Terry McLaurin of the Washington Commanders. It was pretty much destiny that I was going to go wide receiver late in the 3rd and early in the 4th. After starting running back, I pretty much had to play catch up at receiver in this league. And, McLaurin's gone over 1,000 yards 2 consecutive years, and it still feels like there's meat on the bone. Was hoping for more of a quarterback upgrade than Carson Wentz, but really I think it's no worse than a lateral move at quarterback after getting Taylor Heineke for most of last year. And, McLaurin is a study, just kind of balls out whenever he's on the field. It hasn't been a great supporting cast, but I do think there is still some untapped upside here, and maybe he'll get a little less defensive attention now that the Commanders have added Jahan Dotson. So McLaurin is the pick here, playing catch up at wide receiver.
What's up, everyone? I'm back on the clock. Adam Krautwurst, DraftSharks.com. Back on the clock at the 403, 4.3. Went Brandin Cooks, wide receiver 20 off the board. Brandin Cooks to 4.3. Is it ahead of ADP? Sure. Don't care. At Draft Sharks, we have him as our wide receiver 13. On most drafts, I'm waiting till the 5th round to get him. But in this league where you got to start 3 receivers and their receivers are flying off the board, I went ahead and I just took Cooks at value, who went off the board at wide receiver 20. We have him as wide receiver 13 over at DraftSharks.com. He's only 28 years old. He's hit 1,000 yards 6 of the past 7 years. He was wide receiver 21 2 years ago, wide receiver 15 2 years ago, wide receiver 21 last year. He's really the only proven target there. He returns to the number 1 receiving role there, should get 130 plus targets on a team that's going to be losing most of the time. He brings wide receiver 1 upside for a wide receiver 2 price. So love Brandin Cooks, took him there. Have my three receivers: Saquon Barkley, Mike Evans, Jalen Waddle, Brandin Cooks. Looking to take another receiver, hopefully coming back to kind of get 4. I like to get 4 good receivers in these drafts. So let's stay tuned and see who I get.
With my 4th pick, I went back to running back because I'm likely to go a relatively fragile running back build for best ball. If you just draft 4 or 5 running backs, that's going to be fairly fragile. I'm going to use most of my roster spots on wide receivers. In order to do that, I'm going to need a number of elite running backs, ideally young running backs. I don't want old, dusty running backs. I want young running backs that are poised to have career years. That's why I drafted DeAndre Swift, and that's why I drafted Cam Akers. Cam Akers is in his super prime for a running back. This is when they do their most damage. He's an all-purpose back with great receiving skills, and he can run inside the tackles, outside the tackles. He's just an all-purpose stud, and he's in the right offense. So for those reasons, I love Mike Williams. I want players that are in the most prolific offenses, and now with a year in the system, I think that Matthew Stafford's going to be even better. This offense could be even more efficient. There's going to be so many red zone visits, and the featured back in this offense is Cam Akers. So what you got from Darrell Henderson, especially through the first, say, 5 weeks of the season before he got nicked up, he was putting up 15 fantasy points a game. Well, if you dialed up the talent level and said, hey, imagine a running back that's bigger, faster, stronger, better than Darrell Henderson in every way, that guy can give you 20 fantasy points a game. And that guy, it's Cam Akers.
At 405, team first and 15 chooses Arizona Cardinals running back James Conner. Abby, why James Conner?
We started off with 3 wide receivers because it is a 3 wide receiver start format here in best ball. We could have gone another wide receiver. We could have gone a tight end, but I felt like getting a running back, an anchor running back in best ball format is very, very important. Still high risk of injury, particularly with someone like James Conner, but the upside is there. We saw what he was able to do last year. He provides us potential, double-digit TDs as well as some a safety net as far as involvement in the passing game. So he was someone I was definitely felt fortunate enough to have fall to us.
Yeah. And I was personally kind of hoping Akers would be there. I feel like Akers kind of has the higher ceiling than Conner. Conner's fine. I definitely love Conner. He definitely produced quite a bit last year, but I feel like Akers is the one that just kind of has the potential to just kind of blow up. I wouldn't mind if we took another wide receiver there, but taking Conner as our first running back, I think is a pretty good solid start.
With pick 4.06 in the FFWC Video Showdown, Full-Time Fantasy selects DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf went off the board in this as wide receiver 21 in a 3 wide receiver start league. I think it's gone too far with DK Metcalf. I know everyone is concerned with the Seattle passing game and the quarterback to be, but if you look at DK Metcalf's stats with Geno Smith on the field in 2021, it's surprisingly good. During that stretch is weeks 5, 6, 7, and 8. He was actually wide receiver number 4 in the league with 78.5 fantasy points. He averaged 19.6 fantasy points per game with Geno. Week 5, he went 5 for 5 with 92 yards and 2 scores. He was wide receiver number 9 that week. Week 6, he went 6 of 7 with 58 yards. No touchdown that week, wide receiver 33. This was the lowest week of his starts with Geno. And then you have week 7, 2 of 5. For 61 yards and 1 score. It was wide receiver number 12 that week. And then in the final week in week 8 with Geno, he went 6 of 6 for 43 yards and another 2 scores with 9 touchdowns. The only downfall with Geno was his snap share. It was the lowest snap shares that he had on the field for the given year. I think that we're going to see a pretty similar connection between these two in 2022 if Geno does win the quarterback job. If he does, wheels up for DK Metcalf and enjoy the discount while you can.
With pick 407, the football diehards take Cowboys running back Ezekiel Elliott. Would have loved to land James Conner here, but I'll settle for a different top 10 running back from last season. I know Elliott endured one of his worst seasons as a pro while limited by a partially torn PCL. Total of 1,002 rushing yards and 10 touchdowns, but averaged a career low 58.9 yards per game and just 4.2 yards per carry, the third lowest mark of his career. He had 287 receiving yards and 2 TDs on 47 catches. His overall RB7 performance in 2021 was based more on his ability to play through the injury and remain on the field despite it. He was one of only 3 top 16 running backs to play in every game. In fact, Elliott, Jonathan Taylor, and Najee Harris were the only running backs to start all 17 games last year. That's worth something, especially with the discounted price this year. I'll get some RB1 weeks out of him, but this is a fair price, even if I expect a slight dip in his overall output.
At the 408, the 33rd team selects Kyle Pitts, tight end from the Falcons. And with Kyle Pitts, what I love about him, I honestly think he should have gone a lot earlier. I wasn't even really considering anyone else in this range when I saw him on the board in the later half of the 4th round. With Kyle Pitts, he had over 1,000 yards as a rookie. And if we look at the past 10 years, rookie pass catchers to hit 1,000 receiving yards In year 2, average over 1,200 yards. They average nearly 17 PPR points a game. The upside for Kyle Pitts, it's unknown. He could truly break fantasy. He's one of those players where if he just produces like a legitimate wide receiver one, which it seems from his deployment where he's frequently out wide, frequently in the slot, very rarely in line, that he really could take that year 2 leap like a receiver does and give you 15, 16, 18, 20 fantasy points a game in 2022.
All right, guys, I'm back with my 4th round pick in this FFWC Best Ball Video Showdown draft. I needed a wide receiver after my Eckler, Mixon, Josh Allen start, and I swung for the fences here. I feel stable enough with my first 3 picks to where I can go get a high ceiling wide receiver in a 4th round. I went for Marquise Brown. I believe Marquise Brown is in line for a monster season now that he's paired with his old college buddy Kyler Murray. The pre-existing rapport that they were prolific together in their collegiate days. Well, Marquise Brown is one of the best deep ball receivers in the NFL, but what people don't realize that Kyler Murray is actually the #1 quarterback in deep ball completion percentage. So if you pair Kyler Murray up with a wide receiver from college, pre-existing rapport, who can go get the deep ball in his own right, there's nothing but fireworks to be had. Also take in consideration the fact that DeAndre Hopkins expected to be suspended for the first 6 games. I say expected because Hopkins is trying to appeal it, but right now he's going to be gone for the first 6 games. It's a Cliff Kingsbury high-octane passing offense that I believe Marquise Brown is going to thrive in. This guy has never popped before. He's never finished better than the wide receiver 21 of fantasy points per game. I believe his upside and ceiling this season is wide receiver 1 territory. No, I'm not saying wide receiver 5 overall. When I say wide receiver 1 territory, I'm like wide receiver 12 to 14 range, and I can get this guy in a 4th round. I'll take this ceiling as long as my first 3 picks are sound and stable like they are in this draft. I'm okay with going for a ceiling play at the wide receiver position in a best ball draft. Marquise Brown, absolutely love this pick, love the landing spot, and again, wide receiver 1 upside in 2022.
With pick 410, the 10th pick in the 4th round, Fantasy Football Diagnostics selects Washington Commanders running back Antonio Gibson. Gibson is my RB16. I was able to get him here as RB20. So nice little discount. I think people are sleeping on Gibson. They're a little down on him. Last year was underwhelming for the entire Washington football team. However, I think, I was given as much as people like to poo-poo Carson Wentz. I feel like he actually brings a better situation here to the Washington Commanders, where there might be some more scoring opportunities, more opportunities to stay on the field, which means, more yards, more receptions, more touchdowns for Antonio Gibson potentially. I still have him hitting the 1,000-yard mark. Got him with, about 42 receptions for almost 300 yards receiving. Have him scoring about 10 total touchdowns on the season. I think he makes a really good RB2. If you decide to go, 0 running back through the first 3 rounds, I think he could be a solid RB1 for you as well. I'm willing to take the shot here on Gibson, betting on the offensive situation being better for the Washington Commanders.
With the 11th pick in the 4th round, the GOAT District selects Allen Robinson, wide receiver for the Los Angeles Rams. Robinson had a disaster of a season last year with less than 40 catches and only 12 games played after 200 combined catches the previous 2 seasons in Chicago. Robinson is due for a big bounce back, in our opinion. We've seen the Rams have great success last year with Odell Beckham and previously with Robert Woods, identifying wide receivers, getting them, and having them have fantasy success as soon as they get to Los Angeles. It's a great scheme for him, and Matt Stafford will be the best quarterback that Allen Robinson has ever played with. We expect for a strong wide receiver 2 season out of Robinson, and we're very happy to get him as our wide receiver 3.
With the 12th pick in the 4th round, the Fantasy Line team select Chicago Bears running back David Montgomery. Montgomery's the 3rd running back that we've selected after Austin Eckler and Nick Chubb. Another guy that has a really nice floor level of production with some ceiling to boot. He scored at least 10 fantasy points last season in all but 3 games. He had shown at least 4 games of 20 or more fantasy points as well to show that ceiling. We're bullish on the Bears' offense this season, even behind an offensive line that really needs to show some improvement this year. We think Montgomery, again, is a guy that can fill in as our very solid RB3 with weeks where he'll provide some RB1 upside. With the first pick in the 5th round, the Fantasy Line team selects Broncos wide receiver Jerry Jeudy. Jeudy was considered one of the best wide receivers coming out of his draft class, yet maybe landed in the worst situation going to Denver where they had just absolutely no quarterback play. As a rookie, he finished with 52 catches for 856 yards. Last season, unfortunately, limited to just 10 games due to injury and poor quarterback play. But this offseason, Denver Broncos made the big move, went and traded for Russell Wilson. We're expecting Jeudy this year to maybe flirt with the team lead in receptions while notching his first 1,000-yard season. Jeudy, for us, very solid floor again with some exciting upside.
With the 2nd pick in the 5th round, the GOAT District selects Darnell Mooney. After selecting the former Chicago wide receiver 1 in Allen Robinson, we followed up with the current wide receiver 1 in Mooney. Mooney had 81 catches last year on 140 targets. He is the unquestioned top target in Chicago this year. He could see 160 targets this season. He looks to be the clear number 1 option for Justin Fields. We expect for him to have a nice, strong season. Structurally, we really like our 4 wide receivers in a row selections. I think it favors the FFWC format, and we were thrilled to get Mooney here. Mooney could be another 3rd-year wide receiver to really, really step up in production.
With pick 503, the 3rd pick in the 5th round, Fantasy Football Diagnostics selects tight end George Kittle, San Francisco 49ers. Get him here as my tight end, as the tight end 4, which is about where I have him here. Feel like Kittle is still in line for a big season, regardless of the change at quarterback. I think that Kyle Shanahan, this passing offense, is still going to continue to run through George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, and Brandon Aiyuk. So I do get, see Deebo Samuel and George Kittle here. Not ideal in terms of attaching myself to this pass offense, but I still think George Kittle is one of the best tight ends in football and the best tight ends in fantasy. So I felt like the value here in the 5th round was, too good to pass up. So got him projected this year for about 1,100 yards receiving, about 6 touchdowns on 115 targets, though. So expecting a big year from Kittle. Expecting, obviously the big concern with him is will he stay healthy? But I think that even with Trey Lance and at quarterback, that we're still going to see a big year out of Mr. George Kittle.
All right, guys, I'm back with my 5th round pick in this FFWC Best Ball Video Showdown draft. And with this pick, I complete the first portion of my bill stack. I went Josh Allen with the 3rd round pick. Now I'm coming back and get Gabriel Davis, and Gabe Davis is my guy. He's one of the more polarizing players on fantasy Twitter this offseason. I'm one of those guys who's all in. I'm one of those guys who believe he has fringe wide receiver 1 upside if all the stars align. I know Gabriel Davis doesn't have a great resume on paper, but if you look at how Gabe Davis finished last season, following the Emmanuel Sanders injury that catapulted Davis up to the number 2 wide receiver spot, you'll see that he played in at least 70% of the snaps from week 14 all the way up to week 20 in the playoffs. Most of those games, all but one, he played at least 83% of the snaps. Now, Gabriel Davis is more than just that one game that he had against Kansas City. I know it was outstanding. I know people want to pay attention to it, but he does a lot of good things well. Not only do we know that there's a rapport here with Josh Allen, but Gabriel Davis, despite a lack of playing time early, was still the number 8 wide receiver in ADOT. He was still the number 14 wide receiver in red zone targets. He had 17 red zone targets, hauling in 9 of them. He also wins the contested ball. He was the 10th best receiver in contested catch rate. 4th wide receiver in the production premium metric on Player Profiler. I love Gabriel Davis. I believe this is the year where he gets the opportunity to start. He's going to shut a lot of people on fantasy Twitter up, and he's going to win a lot of people fantasy football leagues. I get you have to pay a premium for a guy with not the best resume. However, this is how you win fantasy football leagues. This is how you win best ball leagues. You have to take your shots, and I'm taking my shot here with Gabriel Davis attached to back-to-back reigning number 1 overall fantasy quarterback, Josh Allen. I got the stack. I love my team so far. I believe my team, if all the stars align, can take down this showdown.
At the 505, the 33rd team selected Lamar Jackson. Fewer things in fantasy football are more certain than Lamar Jackson leading quarterbacks in rush attempts per game. He's averaged 11 a game throughout his entire career each season. He is number 1 in that area. We know that mobile quarterbacks score fantasy points because of how a rushing yard is worth 2.5 times more than a passing yard for fantasy points. In 2019, Lamar Jackson had the most fantasy points by a quarterback ever. He had over 28 per game in a run-heavy scheme with a rookie Marquise Brown, a year 2 Mark Andrews, 30-year-old Mark Ingram in the backfield. This year, we've got JK Dobbins in the backfield, who, even though he's coming off the ACL, he's probably an upgrade on Mark Ingram. We've got Rashod Bateman, who I think is just a much more well-rounded receiver than Marquise Brown. And we have Mark Andrews, who is now taking the massive step forward. Lamar Jackson, he's simply set up to smash this year.
With pick 506, the football diehards land Chargers quarterback Justin Herbert. I'm not an early QB drafter, but I'm not afraid to dive into the pool when I don't love the value available at other positions, and that was the case here. I do like Herbert. He's my number 2 quarterback. Remember, he ranked in the top 3 in pass attempts, completions, yards, and TDs last season, also among the top 3 in fantasy scoring. Better still, he's mobile and physical enough to add some rushing equity. With Mike Williams returning to continue working alongside Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler, expecting Herbert to match last year's total seems more than reasonable. Adding to them playing in the wild AFC West isn't a reach either as he continues to develop and gain experience.
Welcome back, everybody. Billy Muzio with Full Time Fantasy, and we are in the 5th round, pick 5.07. I took Rashod Bateman, taken off the board here as wide receiver 27. If you look at the full-time fantasy rankings, we have him as wide receiver 24, just cracking 1,000 yards and 6 scores. There's a lot of opportunity here in Baltimore after Marquise Brown was suddenly traded to the Arizona Cardinals. It opens up about 45% of the team's target share, 267 vacated targets here for Baltimore, most of those in which we are expecting to go to Mark Andrews and Rashod Bateman. So I'm very high on Bateman this year. He was selected in round 1 of last year. We're expecting a major leap here in round 2. Very excited for the upside, I should say, of the Baltimore Ravens and what Bateman's going to be able to bring to the table. Very excited to see what they're going to be able to do, and excited to get him here as wide receiver 27 for my team.
All right, at pick 508, I personally chose to pick Patrick Mahomes. I thought that there was a little mini run of quarterbacks to go right there. I also wanted a top quarterback to be chosen on a best ball team that was safe. Abby, do you agree with the pick, or do you think that we should have waited at quarterback?
I think we definitely should have waited at quarterback. I think quarterback in best ball is one of those positions where you can attack early. I think this is the time where you want to be looking at finding value in draft, drafting multiple higher upside quarterbacks. You can even go with a safe floor and a high upside pick like a Derek Carr and a Daniel Jones type tandem. I feel like this early in the draft, there's still a lot of quality starters on the board, guys who provide, a nice weekly safe floor, but also some upside. So I like to try and attack those positions first. I also feel like we could have gotten, someone just as good as Mahomes or with the upside, around the 2 later. Particularly like someone, Jalen Hurts. I'm not too upset with the pick. I think if you feel like Mahomes, truly has that, QB1, QB2 overall upside, it's not a bad idea to get a quarterback, the position that scores the most points and lock that in. So I would have waited, but not a terrible pick by any.
All right, Amari Cooper in the 5th round. Why Amari Cooper in the 5th round? Well, it's best ball. So I think this is a good time to talk about the difference between best ball and a traditional league. So if this was a traditional league, I would have gone JuJu SmithSchuster. JuJu went with the next pick. It was between JuJu and Amari Cooper. Because I do not have access to the waiver wire, because these early round picks are so critical that you're getting production week in, week out, I was forced to take Amari Cooper, an established number one. This guy puts up 1,000 yards most seasons. He's going to be the number one option for the Browns. I get it. Run first offense. I get it. We're going to see some Jacoby Brissett. But Amari Cooper is going to be the singular option, first read every time in that passing game. We know he's going to blast well past 100 targets. He's going to have 1,000 yards and 5 to 10 touchdowns. Lock it in. Yes, JuJu has more upside, but the risk that he's just not good, that the $5 million prove-it deal was indicative of his lack of ability to really elevate, post Ben Roethlisberger in that historic season many years ago. It's been a long time since we saw big production from JuJu. Cooper gives it to you every year. Traditional league, I go JuJu, chase that rainbow. But in best ball, unable to access the waiver wire. Oh, give me Amari Cooper.
Hey, everybody. Adam Krautwurst from DraftSharks.com. Pick 510. I went JuJu SmithSchuster in this FFWC Showdown draft. Absolutely love that pick. Took him as the wide receiver 29 to round out my receiving core. JuJu is a big time bounce back candidate. Goes from Pittsburgh, where he came off injury, week 5, shoulder injury, ended his season. Big Ben hasn't been right in two or 3 years. JuJu had an amazing start to his career. He showed his talent. One of the most productive receivers ever in their first 2 years in the league. He's turning just 26. I feel like he'll be rejuvenated in Kansas City. They traded for him. They picked him up, and then they traded Tyreek Hill immediately. So they believe in this guy. I think JuJu's going to have a big year there. I was able to get him as my wide receiver 4 in this must-start 3 receiver format. JuJu could finish the year as a wide receiver 1. He's done it before in Pittsburgh. He can absolutely do it again here in Kansas City. Love the upside that JuJu brings. So I took him at the 510. I think I'm done with receiver for now. We'll see. Looking to maybe get my quarterback in round 6. So stay tuned.
Pat Fitzmaurice of Fantasy Pros here, and in the FFWC Video Showdown, so graciously hosted by Billy Musio with pick number 511. I went with Darren Waller. I'm generally not an early tight end guy, but I thought the value was pretty good here after Kittle had gone 9 spots earlier, and I believe Kyle Pitts went about 16 spots earlier. All right, we know that the target count is going to come down. Waller's averaged about 9 targets a game the last few years. Not going to happen with Devonta Adams aboard, but I still think 6 or 7 targets a game is realistic. And, Waller with that great movement skills, huge catch radius, really talented dude. 6 or 7 targets a game is enough for him to still have a pretty significant impact. And, over 1,100 yards in 2019 and 20, ran into some knee issues last year that kind of held the numbers down, is entering his age 30 season, a bit of a concern, but still one of the best tight ends in the game. And I thought there was value here at 5'11".
With the 5.12 Best Ball Fantasy Podcast selects Amon Ra St. Brown, the sun god himself, heavily targeted near the end of the season. All 6 of his final games were double-digit targets. 5 of those 6 games, top 10 wide receiver in each of those weeks. And the Lions were very intentional about their offseason signing DJ Chark as a deep threat, and then drafting Jameson Williams as a long-term superstar project. So the immediate right now redraft or best ball play in this Lions offense is Amon Ra St. Brown. We saw spike weeks out of him, and that's within his range of outcomes. So getting Amon Ra St. Brown as my wide receiver 3, that's what I wanted to target. I thought about Drake London at this spot. I also thought about going some running backs, but I thought I can get some running backs later. Amon Ra St. Brown, I'm a bigger believer now, and that's one player that I've changed my mind on compared to earlier this offseason. And then at the 6.01, Best Ball Fantasy Podcast selects Elija Moore. Elija Moore, the New York Jets wide receiver, and it seems like I'm going Jets, Jets this season. But Elija Moore in two different games this past season was the number 1 and number 3 weekly finisher among all wide receivers against the Indianapolis Colts and the Miami Dolphins, both really good defenses at defending the pass. And that's with Mike White and Zach Wilson, Josh Johnson. The sky is the limit for Elija Moore, who has a 91st percentile 40-yard dash, 97th percentile agility score. And this is an ascending Jets offense that added Garrett Wilson, added Breece Hall, improved their offensive line, and we expect that Zach Wilson can only get better. So I'm a big believer in Elija Moore taking a second step during his sophomore season.
Pat Fitzmaurice of Fantasy Pros here, and with pick number 602 in the FFWC Video Showdown, I took Drake London of the Atlanta Falcons, the rookie. Honestly, a bit of a reach here. Didn't like any of the options. I kind of wanted Elija Moore, who went a pick ahead of me, and I maybe made a mistake by taking Darren Waller at 5'11", because Team 12 picked Travis Kelce in the first round and was probably not likely to go with the bully tight end approach, taking a second one here. Should have realized that and gone with Elija Moore. And then Waller coming back. Didn't do that, but I do like London's upside here. Just not a lot other than Kyle Pitts in this Atlanta passing game as far as targets. I think Pitts and London could combine for massive target share. And London, I mean, he could be another Mike Evans. He's just so physically dominant in his final year at USC. 88 catches in 8 games, 11 catches a game. That's sick. 1,084 yards and 7 touchdowns in those 8 games. This guy is a baller and just a physical mismatch for the cornerbacks he goes up against. I do think there's immediate upside here.
What up, guys? Adam Krautwurst, DraftSharks.com. On the clock here at the 6.3. My quarterback is still there. My personal QB1 is still there. Kyler Murray. We have him as the QB2 over at DraftSharks.com. Higher than consensus on him for sure. Got him as the QB5 in this draft. Very excited about that. Kyler Murray has amazing upside. Could rush for 1,000. Could throw for 5,000. When Hopkins gets back, he'll have weapons galore. Has a great late season schedule. Love that about him. Love Kyler Murray there. Drake London got taken right in front of Kyler. I would have considered Drake London there as my wide receiver 5 on my team. But I love being able to take Kyler Murray there as the QB5. Tier break after that for me for sure. So I got that elite quarterback to go with the rest of my roster. Right now I'm clearly starting Hero RB, Saquon Barkley, Mike Evans, Jalen Waddle, Brandin Cooks, JuJu Smith-Schuster, and now Kyler Murray. I will come back in the 7th round and look to take a running back, another one. There's one I'm targeting. Hopefully he makes it back to me.
Oh, you love the cadence. Wide receiver, running back, wide receiver, running back, wide receiver, running back, wide receiver, running back for the Podfather. And yet another running back drafted in the 2020 class, one of the great running back classes of all time. It was Jonathan Taylor and a bunch of other studs. DeAndre Swift, Cam Akers, and oh, by the way, JK Dobbins. That's my 3rd running back. I love young stud running backs. I'm not interested in old, dusty Ezekiel Elliott, David Montgomery. Get out of here with your old dusty running backs putting up the 3.8 yards per carry. Give me the juice. J.K. Dobbins tore his ACL last August. He'll have a full 12 months to recover. So far, no setbacks. I think he'll be ready for week 1. He'll be managed, like the workload will be managed first few weeks of the season, but I do anticipate the Ravens dumping it off more to running backs this year because there is no Marquise Brown, so a lot of vacated targets. Who's after Andrews and Bateman in that passing game? Was it going to be Devin Duvernay? I'm banking on Dobbins not just scoring a bunch of touchdowns in what will be, I think, a rejuvenated Ravens offense, but also catching more passes than you might think.
At 6:05, team first and 15 chooses Adam Thielen, wide receiver, Minnesota Vikings. Dio, this was your pick. Why Adam Thielen?
Well, I definitely didn't want to go running back. With this type of roster construction, as far as having starting 3 wide receivers with a flex, I definitely kind of wanted to go with another wide receiver. I actually was hoping that we went wide receiver in the 5th round. Just again, because kind of what Abby was saying with the last pick, I feel like we could probably get a good quarterback later in the draft. But, with the way the draft fell, I'm still happy with Thielen where we got him. Still were able to get a strong wide receiver 4 there. And looking back at it, I actually don't mind the Mahomes pick as much anymore. Definitely with the best ball, you get a running back later that can kind of fulfill that hole. So I personally want to go with Thielen, who I feel is going to be in that Vikings offense that has high potential to score quite a few points this year. And I just want to kind of a little piece of it.
Me again, everybody. Billy Musi with Full Time Fantasy. Round 6 now, and I'm at 6-6. I just selected Russell Gage. I really like Russell Gage this year. We are not expecting Godwin to return, at least in the first few weeks of the fantasy season. If he does, it would be pretty much a miracle. The average recovery time for an ACL injury is 10 months. According to studies, the earliest to ever come back prior to that was Gronkowski at 8 months, who did not see the field in full capacity during those first few weeks. So even if Godwin does hit the field early in the season, which is not likely in my opinion, Russell Gage should be running at full capacity where Godwin is not. So I just took Godwin off the board as wide receiver 34. He is my wide receiver number 4. And there's been something I've been really liking to do lately in best ball. It was definitely more appealing when Russell Gage had a deeper discount in rounds 9 and 10. But if that certain somebody's still on the board, I'm going to give you a little teaser. His name is DeAndre Hopkins. Let's hope that he makes it back around to me. The reason I like doing this is we're going to get great spike weeks between balancing the season. Russell Gage will give us that balance in the first part of the season while Godwin is out. And then as Godwin comes back and starts recovering and coming into the season at full health, Russell Gage's fantasy output more than likely start to taper off, which allows you time for DeAndre Hopkins to get back from suspension. And as soon as those times overlap, we're going to start seeing DeAndre Hopkins hit the field, and those fantasy points are going to start really hitting your roster, and you're not going to skip a beat. Russell Gage in the first half, DeAndre Hopkins the second half. Let's hope DeAndre Hopkins is there in round 7. Keep him crossed.
With pick 607, the football diehards go with Saints wide receiver Michael Thomas. Much like the last round, not in love with some of the values here, so risk, meet, reward. Hopefully. In case you somehow missed it, Thomas had one of the greatest seasons for a receiver in NFL history in 2019 with 149 catches for 1,725 yards and 9 touchdowns. But he played only 7 games in 2020 before sitting out last year due to an ongoing ankle issue, an unexpected surgery, and some miscommunications with the club. While he hasn't taken part in OTAs yet, Thomas and the team are on the same page. Better still, he's resumed running, and coaches and those who follow the team closely expect him to be ready week 1. I don't expect him to be as dominant as he once was. He'll be playing with Jameis Winston and not Drew Brees, but a solid target share and week-to-week wide receiver 1 upside, not out of the question. Fingers crossed.
With the 608, the 33rd team selects Devonta Smith. I'm not fully convinced that A.J. Brown out-targets him. Do I think it's likely? Yes. Do I think that it's going to happen? I don't know. Maybe a 65-70% chance A.J. Brown out-targets him. Devonta Smith had a 22% target share as a rookie. That's really, really strong. The two of them don't really overlap too much in their route concepts. The Eagles had a really high pass rate early on in the season until they realized that heavy snaps from Jalen Reagor and Quez Watkins meant that a run game would probably be more effective for that offense. I am still in on Devonta Smith for this season. I think he's a steal in the late 6th round when we really just have no idea who, A.J. Brown, who's going to lead the team in targets. We could very well be looking at Devonta Smith with 1,100, 1,200 receiving yards by season's end, and I'm all in on him this year.
All right, guys, I'm back with my 6th round pick in this FFWC Best Ball Video Showdown. I love my start. Eckler, Mixon, Josh Allen in the first 3 rounds. Sturdy, sound, building blocks. Then I attack wide receiver with my next 3 picks. I go Marquise Brown in the 4th round, high ceiling. Gabriel Davis in the 5th round, high ceiling, which also completes one portion of my bill stack. And now in the 6th round, I go Brandon Aiyuk. I like Brandon Aiyuk, especially in best ball. Brandon Aiyuk is in a somewhat crowded offense if we take in consideration that Shanahan wants to run the football. So the passing targets may not be there every week, but this is best ball. You don't have to play the guessing game. When they're there, Brandon Aiyuk's going to deliver. In his rookie year, he finishes as the wide receiver 18 in fantasy points per game. Last year, wide receiver 39. But what happened last year? Kind of started shaky, ended up in Shanahan's doghouse, came out of it, and thrived in the second half of the year. What do we know about this San Francisco offense? Well, they don't check down to the running back often, which means more opportunities for their regular pass catchers. George Kittle can sometimes struggle with the injury bug, just like Deebo Samuel can. We also don't know how they're going to utilize Deebo Samuel, which tells me Brandon Aiyuk could lead this team in targets outside of George Kittle. Brandon Aiyuk played 83.6% of the snaps last season. Good for 21st amongst wide receivers. Why is that important? Well, if you're not on the field, you can't get a target. If you can't get a target, you can't score fantasy points. Brandon Aiyuk was also number 19 in yards after the catch, number 11 in yards per target. So there's a couple of nice metrics we can hang our hats on for Brandon Aiyuk, a player that I like, a player that I believe can thrive, whether it's Jimmy Garoppolo or Trey Lance under center, because Kyle Shanahan is going to put his skill position players in a position to succeed. I'm fine with Brandon Aiyuk in the 6th round of fantasy football best ball drafts. I'm not sure I'm in love with him so much in leagues that are not best ball, but in this format and with my start, I'm extremely happy to take a shot on Brandon Aiyuk in the 6th round.
With pick 610, the 10th pick in the 6th round, Fantasy Football Diagnostics selects Russell Wilson, quarterback of the Denver Broncos. I'm expecting a big year out of Russell Wilson. But I must say I was expecting to get another Russell in this spot. I was really looking to get Russell Gage, who I'm really high on, but our boy Billy Muzio was able to snag him just 4 picks ahead of my selection here. So ideally, I was really looking at either him or maybe like Michael Thomas, who also went ahead of this spot. So I go to grab Russell Wilson here, hoping that maybe, a receiver like a Chris Godwin or a Hunter Renfrow will make it back to me on the way back. So I'm taking my shot here on Russell Wilson, who I have as my QB2 this year. I know that's high praise, but when you look at the transition over to Nathaniel Hackett and the Denver Broncos, Hackett is coming over from Green Bay, where they let obviously Aaron Rodgers, one of the best quarterbacks in football, run the show over there, and really have a high passing rate, especially not just throughout the game, but on early downs as well. And I feel like Russell Wilson being brought over, the draft capital that was spent to bring him over here, you're not going to use that man to his ability. You're not going to throw the football. He's been an efficient passer on less attempts than other quarterbacks, being in Seattle and being in a run-first offense. But now we watch him here in this situation. I think there's more pass opportunities for him. And obviously you consider the weapons like Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy and Tim Patrick, Al O, Javonte Williams in the backfield. I think the sky's the limit here for Russ, and don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to see him potentially lead the league in touchdowns here. So Russell Wilson expecting a big year. Happy to get him as my QB6. I think he's going off the board around like QB9 or so, but I wasn't going to be willing to lose him here because I do think he's in for a big season.
With the 11th pick in the 6th round, the GOAT District selects Jalen Hurts. This was an easy selection for us after selecting A.J. Brown previously. We now have exposure to the Philadelphia correlation in what we believe will be a very explosive offense. Hurts last year finished as QB6 overall, mainly due to the fact that he had 10 rushing touchdowns and over 700 rushing yards. We think this year he can take a big step forward as a passer. He has Dallas Goedert, he has Devonta Smith, and now adds an alpha wide receiver 1 in A.J. Brown. We really like the Philadelphia offensive line, and we think that this was an easy selection for us. And we're very happy to have the A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts combination. We think it's a little underrated right now in fantasy.
The 12th pick in the 6th round, the Fantasyland team selects Josh Jacobs of the Las Vegas Raiders. While unexciting to most, Jacobs has provided a top 12 fantasy season in PPR leagues in each of the last 2 years. With Josh McDaniels now the head coach, he brings an offense that is proven to have nice touchdown upside for their featured running backs in that offense. He even brought over Jakob Johnson from New England, so they're going to employ a fullback as well, which should only open up some more lanes for Jacobs to run through. We even saw Jacobs set a career high in receptions last year as well. They didn't really bring in anybody to compete with Josh Jacobs for touches. Again, we think this is a very safe floor play with potentially nice upside given the new offense. With the first pick in round 7, the Fantasyland team select Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receiver Chris Godwin. Godwin, at the time of this pick, was reported to potentially be ready for week 1. Started NFL training camp. He's not on the PUP list. That bodes well for the guy that we took as our 3rd wide receiver after going Keenan Allen and Jerry Jeudy earlier in the draft. We think Godwin provides a great ceiling, a really strong floor. Last year, before tearing his ACL through 14 games, 98 catches, 1,100 yards. Tom Brady last year led the league in pass attempts and passing yards. He should be one of his favorite targets again this year. We're locking up a great play here in round 7.
With the 2nd pick in the 7th round, the GOAT District selects Hunter Renfrow. This was a difficult decision for us. We labored between A.J. Dillon and Renfrow. We ultimately went with the wide receiver due to the FFWC structure and the fact that we saw a positional run coming that would dry up the wide receiver spot completely. We like Renfrow this year, maybe a little bit ahead of the market. Last year, he finished as wide receiver 10 overall in PPR scoring. He did so only on 128 targets. Despite the addition of Davante Adams, we still believe that 128 targets is in the realm of possibilities. We like the connection that he displayed last year with Derek Carr, and we think that the target tree in Las Vegas is going to be very narrow. Ultimately, a very tough decision going Renfrow over Dillon, but we're happy that we made it.
With pick 703, 3rd pick in the 7th round, Fantasy Football Diagnostics selects Green Bay running back A.J. Dillon. Absolutely love A.J. Dillon this year. I think that the Packers are capable of providing fantasy players with 2 top 20 running backs. I've got A.J. Dillon as my running back 19. I think that he's obviously, we saw him play the Jamal Williams role to a T almost last year. Didn't have the target or the work in the pass game maybe that Jamal Williams would have had. But he's still effective. I think 34 receptions or something like that. So we obviously know what he can do on the ground. We know that he's going to have that role as well, being able to spell Aaron Jones. But I think Aaron Jones will be more involved in the passing game with the departure of Davante Adams, which should lead to more rushing opportunities for A.J. Dillon here. So again, I got him as my running back 19 in PPR leagues. Was really hoping Chris Godwin or Hunter Renfrow would make it back to me. Neither one of those guys did. So I have no issue here pulling the trigger on a running back that I've got in my top 20, especially when you consider the fact that Kamara could be suspended and he's my RB1 right now. So I could use A.J. Dillon for those first few weeks of the season whenever Kamara is suspended. But then on top of that, Dillon's got that upside that most running backs in this spot don't really have, where if something, God forbid, something does happen to Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon immediately catapults into a weekly top 12 option. So really like the upside here with Dillon and definitely like his role here for the Packers.
What's going on, everybody? In the 7th round of the FFWC Best Ball Video Showdown, I took Christian Kirk. And starting in round 4, I had a 4-round run picking wide receivers. Marquise Brown, Gabriel Davis for the Josh Allen stack, Brandon Aiyuk, Christian Kirk. And after starting the draft with Eckler, Mixon, and Josh Allen, I felt pretty damn stable at running back and obviously the quarterback position really early, but I really wanted that Bill stack. So what I did here, I chased ceiling with all of these wide receivers, hoping at least 1 to 2 hit. Obviously, if all 4 hit, I'm sitting pretty, but hopefully 2 of these 4 wide receivers hit their ceiling. And that's what I was going for here. Now, Christian Kirk is the one I like the least, but he goes over to Jacksonville. He's a predominant slot wide receiver. And what is Trevor Lawrence going to lean on entering year 2 and his first year in a stable Doug Peterson system? He's going to lean on the slot receiver and the tight end, which is why I went for Christian Kirk here. Not only can Christian Kirk play out of the slot, but he's a pretty good deep ball receiver too. And while Marvin Jones is still on the offense, he's the veteran to lean on, Christian Kirk can still get open and still get the job done. Last year, he had 103 targets. I expect Christian Kirk's target share to see a little bit of an uptick with the Jacksonville Jaguars. No more DeAndre Hopkins, no more Zach Ertz to contend with like he had in Arizona. He is expected to be the most targeted wide receiver on Jacksonville's offense, which is why I took him in the 7th round of this best ball draft, chasing the ceiling, chasing the targets in the new offense with Christian Kirk.
With the 7:05, the 33rd team selects Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Edwards-Helaire had a very promising rookie season. Got a lot of carries. He had a very strong target share. What happened in year 2? Every efficiency metric, all of his usage stats precipitously declined. What did we find out recently? We found out that before the 2021 season started, CEH underwent, I believe it was a gallbladder surgery. He was down to 160 pounds when he entered training camp. He's now fully healthy. They really didn't bring in much. They brought in Ronald Jones, who's a terrible pass catcher. He's limited as a runner. And in fantasy, you don't want Ronald Jones because the fumbles mean that the goal line work could be hard to come by. And we know that he's got brick hands, so the receiving work won't be there either. CEH has a clear-cut path right now to goal line work and targets in one of the best offenses in the entire NFL.
We pick 706, the football diehards select the 49ers running back Elijah Mitchell. Coming off a surprising 963-yard rookie season, Mitchell proved ideal for Kyle Shanahan's scheme with his ability to get wide, make the correct cuts, and run through arm tackles. Mitchell finished 14th among running backs in PPR points per game and appears to be heading into 2022 with the lead role in his possession. Goes without saying his potential success this year will hinge on his health. Mitchell missed 6 games to injury last year, and his ongoing ability to fend off challenges from Jeff Wilson Jr., Trey Sermon, and incoming rookie Tyrion Davis-Price. It's also worth noting if Mitchell leads the 49ers in rushing in 2022, he'll be the first running back to repeat under Shanahan's tutelage since Devonta Freeman in Atlanta in 2015-2016. All of these reasons are why I was able to land Mitchell, a presumptive feature back in round 7.
Everybody, Billy Musio, the full-time fantasy, and the plan worked out. If you recall, last round at 6-6, I told you that I was hoping to get DeAndre Hopkins on the way back to pair the season balance with Russell Gage earlier performances and production with DeAndre Hopkins' second half of the season return. And it did work out. So this is something I've been liking to do in best ball, especially when Russell Gage was going at a cheaper price. You don't need me to tell you how good DeAndre Hopkins has been in his career. Just some short notes real quick. In his 9-year career, 6 of those 9 years, he has finished as the wide receiver 5 or better in each of those 6 seasons. We have a pretty potent Arizona Cardinal offense. I'm excited for him to get back in week 6 as Russell Gage's fantasy points probably start tapering off with the return of Godwin. So the balance plan, yin and yang, of the beginning of the season and into the season should pay off, and I'm excited to see this work out here in 2022. DeAndre Hopkins, welcome to the squad.
At pick 708, team 1st and 15 chooses Hockenson, Detroit Lions tight end. Abby, this was your pick. Why Hawk? Why not wait later on the tight end?
Yeah, it's a good question. So this is definitely a strategy pick. This was a hammer pick as far as us, trying to actually win this particular league. I'm looking at the tight end available and trying to think to myself who could really kind of, step away from that group and be a top 2, top 3 tight end. And I see that in TJ Hawk. He's someone who could be the top target leader on his own team, if not the second, target leader. We know that offense is improving. O-line's improving. A second year in the system. he's getting added experience at the tight end position. We see his touchdown numbers increase, to 8, 9. It's really going to hammer that home, and he's someone who can also provide, receptions in a PPR format as well. Could have easily went RB, could have went wide receiver, but I felt like in this format, I wanted to gamble a bit and hope that running back would fall to us in the later rounds.
So far I've had an incredible rationale for the players I've drafted. This time, round 7, not so much. I just have a very easy cheat code for a draft. When you're drafting on other platforms, you use the ADP from the consensus or other drafts against your competitors. And in this particular draft, Dalton Schultz falling to pick 81 when his underdog ADP, for example, is 68. So his underdog ADP is 68. If I can get and bank 13 slots of value this early in a draft, I'm going to do it. I don't even love Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz is the least athletic tight end that's ranked in the top 20, right? He's best comparable to Austin Hooper, but once upon a time, Austin Hooper was a top 5 producer in that Atlanta Falcons offense because he was the third option in a up-tempo, high-volume offense. And I think that's what Dalton Schultz is going to be. He's going to be the third option, the clear third option in an up-tempo, high-volume offense in Dallas. And I'm playing the ADP arbitrage game, and there's really nothing else to it. That's all I got.
Adam Krautwurst, DraftSharks.com here. Pick at the 7-10. Fine, I'll take a running back. Tony Pollard. Took him as RB27 in this draft. Obviously, upside in the top 5 for running backs. Absolutely. Took him as RB27 at DraftSharks.com. We have him as RB24. 5th last year in NFL's next-gen rushing yards over expectation. 9th in Football Outsiders rushing DYAR. Yeah, we know. Tony Pollard's really, really good. Will Zeke Elliott finally get hurt? Is this the year they finally make Zeke Elliott sit the bench for the better running back? Pollard still had over 1,000 yards last year, even playing second fiddle. They're talking about getting him more involved in the passing game. No Amari Cooper. They're absolutely explosive. Is a fine RB2 when you start with a hero or 0 RB build. Is a fine flex play if you have to start him at flex, but I'm taking him here, banking on Zeke Elliott falling off a cliff this year and having Saquon Barkley and Tony Pollard, 2 top 5 running backs to go along with my team. I'm targeting a tight end that's being undervalued with my next pick. Stay tuned and see if I can grab him.
Pat Fitzmaurice of Fantasy Pros, and with pick 7-11 in the FFWC Video Showdown, I went for Kadarius Toney, a favorite of mine. This is a gamble on high upside, and we saw that upside in weeks 4 and 5 of his rookie season when he went for 6 catches and 78 yards against the Saints, and then 10 catches, 189 yards against the Cowboys in week 5. And man, in those 2 weeks, we saw some springy, explosive athleticism. This guy just crackles with electricity after the catch. Really exciting. But man, he ran into multiple injury problems late in the season. It wasn't just one thing. It was like a medley of 5 or 6 injuries, COVID. He just couldn't stay on the field down the stretch. So we didn't get to see what he can do. And I think that's kind of keeping his ADP down this year. I knew he wasn't going to be around for me in the 9th round. So I pretty much had to get him here. Very excited about the upside. Just needs to stay on the field.
With the 7-12, Best Bell Fantasy Podcast selects Dak Prescott. And this is a slam dunk pick, getting Dak Prescott at about ADP and to stack with CeeDee Lamb. But also I'm optimistic about Dak Prescott as a fantasy option. I have him projected for over 5,100 passing yards, 33 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 4 rushing scores, almost 260 rushing yards, and 368 quarterback fantasy points. He's done it all over the last 3 seasons, over 20 fantasy points per game. In fact, in 2019, he was the quarterback 3 in fantasy points per game. 2020, nearly 28 fantasy points per game before coming back from a devastating knee injury. And it made sense for me to take this quarterback, Dak Prescott, at quarterback 8. It was about time for me to take him and to stack with CeeDee Lamb. Chef's kiss. And then at the 801, I took Tyler Lockett. And Tyler Lockett was the 43rd wide receiver off of the board. And I think that he secures the upside picks. So Lockett was my 5th wide receiver at that spot. And I was agonizing over him, or should I take Chase Edmonds in particular? Because at this point in the draft, I only have one running back, and that's Breece Hall. But Tyler Lockett has been top 5 each of the last 2 seasons in wide receiver 1 weekly rate. I know he doesn't have Russell Wilson anymore, but Geno Smith, we saw a wide receiver 5 weekly finish for Tyler Lockett last season when Geno Smith was in for Russell Wilson. I have Tyler Lockett projected for 71 receptions, 942 receiving yards, just over 4 touchdowns, and 155 half PPR fantasy points. That would have been about wide receiver 28. So I think getting Lockett at wide receiver 43 is a great value.
Pat Fitzmaurice of Fantasy Pros, and with pick 802 in the FFWC Video Showdown, I took Joe Burrow. I believe he was the 8th or 9th, I think 9th quarterback off the board, and I'm sky high on Burrow. 8.9 yards per attempt per game last year. I consider that a symptom of greatness. Why? Tom Brady has never averaged 8.9 yards per pass attempt in his entire career in any season. Aaron Rodgers has done it once. And yes, I've actually seen the argument that, Joe Burrow made a lot of big plays and he's bound to regress there. That's not repeatable. For heaven's sake, his wide receivers are Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Of course, he's going to make more than his share of big plays. So not only that, but I think he's going to run more now that he's over a year removed from the ACL tear he sustained as a rookie in 2020. So I still think there's untapped upside here. He threw like almost 150 fewer passes than Justin Herbert last year. If that volume ticks up, look out.
Hey guys, Adam Krautwurst from DraftSharks.com again on the clock at the 8:03, and I went with tight end Dallas Goedert. He's tight end 8 off the board. Over at DraftSharks, we have him as our tight end 5. So I like that value a lot. He ranked 5th among tight ends in target share last year. He led the position in yards per route run, depends on where you're from. And so Zach Ertz left town about halfway through the year. He went from an 11.1% target share, Dallas Goedert did, to a 24.6% target share after that trade. So we love Dallas Goedert over at DraftSharks.com. I would love to get him and kind of start to round out my squad. Saquon Barkley and Tony Pollard at running back, Mike Evans, Jalen Waddle, Brandin Cooks, JuJu Smith-Schuster at receiver, Kyler Murray as my quarterback, and Dallas Goedert as my tight end. Love that start, and we'll see.
Now, this pick I'm not proud of. This pick was a mistake. If I could go back in time, if I had a time machine, and I knew how late Derek Carr and how late Kirk Cousins would go, I would not have drafted Tom Brady. But I was doing the thing like I did with Dalton Schultz. I was like, it's ADP arbitrage, right? Brady goes at least 10 spots earlier on Underdog. I got to go Brady here. Meanwhile, I forgot to read the room. This is a room that waits on quarterback. Kirk Cousins was drafted at pick 140. I could have had Kirk Cousins instead of Rashod White. So if I could go back in time, would I rather have Brady and Rashod White or James Cook and Kirk Cousins? And the answer is absolutely James Cook and Kirk Cousins. And even James Cook, like I wouldn't even need to take James Cook. It wouldn't even be James Cook. It's more like Chase Edmonds, right? So that's how bad this pick was, right? I would rather have Cook and Cousins over White and Brady, and yet in this particular draft, the shocking part is and the embarrassing part is that I took Tom Brady, not just over James Cook and a bunch of other running backs. I took him over a guy I absolutely love. I took him over Devin Singletary, but I like James Cook better than Devin Singletary. I took Tom Brady ahead of Chase Edmonds, which was a catastrophic blunder in hindsight. Had I known where I could have got Carr and Cousins, I would have gone Edmonds. Edmonds was brought to Miami for the specific reason of being the primary back, getting 55+% of the touches, because he's a quality inside zone runner. He can also take it outside. He can also catch the ball in the passing game. He's been one of the top yards per touch players in the league. Now, I know that my man Abib will be talking about Chase Edmonds as well, so I just want to let Abib know that he had the right pick. I had the wrong pick. His Chase Edmonds pick was exquisite. I wish I had picked him. So basically what I want to do is support Abib as much as possible in his Chase Edmonds pick, because now, in hindsight, looking at this draft board, I'm embarrassed that I took Tom Brady. It did allow me, taking Brady and then following it up with Matthew Stafford, which we'll talk about, does allow me to just hold the line at 2 quarterbacks in a best ball league, which is an advantage for sure. But I overpaid for that advantage because I could also have stuck at 2 quarterbacks with Stafford and Carr, Stafford and Cousins. The Tom Brady pick wasn't necessary. I'm an idiot, and I regret it.
I picked 805, team first to 15 chooses Chase Edmonds. I chose Chase because we needed another running back. We had the choice between him, Devin Singletary, and then also Miles Sanders. I thought that he had the higher upside. Did I make the right choice there, Dio, or should I have chosen someone else?
I mean, I personally love the pick. I know we were kind of waffling between Chase or Devin. And again, honestly, I wouldn't even mind if we went another wide receiver. But, you know, I started looking at these best balls. I definitely, you know, what's the flavor of the year is stacking, you know, and with us having Tyreek Hill with our second pick in the draft and now having Chase Edmonds, who I kind of see as being the lead back for that team, we're kind of starting to build this Miami type correlation. Hopefully we're able to get somebody later like a Tua or a Gesicki or even a Cedric Wilson. I don't mind. But, you know, don't mind the pick. I don't mind waiting on running backs with this type of format, but, you know, if we're going to get a running back, I definitely do like that pick. I don't know what you feel about that, Abby.
Yeah, I think Edmonds Singletary, it's a toss-up, you know, really, you know, I think at this point we're all guessing. So I have no issues at all with the Chase Edmonds pick. You know, could be a PPR monster, really.
Welcome back, everybody. Billy Musio here with Full-Time Fantasy, and we're in round 8 now, 8-6 to be exact. And I'm starting to look at running backs now. We started the draft with wide receiver with Cooper Kupp at the 1-7. We took Aaron Jones and Travis Etienne at the 2-3. Then we hammered wide receiver pretty heavily because the 3 wide receiver start league. Took DK Metcalf in round 4, Rashod Bateman in round 5, Gage in round 6, Hopkins in round 7 for that first and second half balance that we described. And now we're in need of another running back here. So we have seen some tight ends fly off the board, 7 to be exact. We've seen some quarterbacks off the board, another 7 to be exact. I am not one to select a quarterback or a tight end in this format this early, so I'm going to continue to push the position. I'm going to take Miles Sanders here off the board at running back 29. I'm excited to see him here fall this far to me, especially with the build that I have gone as kind of a double hero running back build. So running back 3 for my team, Miles Sanders, running back 29 off the board. Philadelphia added the likes of A.J. Brown. We should probably see some more red zone opportunities, better pace of play for the rushing game for Philadelphia, and some more favorable game scripts. Excited to have Miles Sanders here, especially best.
With pick 807, the football diehards go with Packers wide receiver Allen Lazard. Seems like Packers rookie wideout Christian Watson, a second-round pick, is drawing a lot of attention, but Aaron Rodgers and the Packers need Lazard in 2022. He's the best current member of the team at the position. Indeed, Lazard is coming off career-high marks in all the key categories: targets, receptions, receiving yards, touchdowns, and fantasy points, although that was only enough for a 47th place finish. He also was busy near the goal line, tied for 8th in the NFL with 12 end zone targets. And I get it. Lazard has never finished better than a wide receiver 4 in terms of fantasy production. The key this season is path to workload with Davante Adams' massive target share out of the way. ESPN's Mike Clay contends a healthy Lazard could conceivably lead the Packers in targets. I agree. And as I find myself chasing wide receivers in this draft, his upside and the opportunity to emerge as Rodgers' top downfield threat, that's appealing.
With the 808, the 33rd team selected Treylon Burks. The other guy that I was considering there when I look at the draft board, probably Trey Lance. I could have snuck a second quarterback in there, but I felt like with the investment I had in Lamar Jackson, it was best to hold off. Treylon Burks is set up for success. As a rookie, there are so many paths for him to succeed. It's going to be really, really difficult for him to fail. Right now, he's going to be competing with Robert Woods, 30 years old, coming off the ACL tear, Nick Westbrook, Austin Hooper. Really, these are the names that we think are going to keep their first-round pick, Treylon Burks, who looks like a carbon copy of A.J. Brown, prospect profile-wise off the field. You get rid of A.J. Brown, you draft Treylon Burks, it feels like that's kind of a one-for-one replacement in terms of how they generally view his role. Of course, I don't expect him to produce quite like A.J. Brown out of the gate. I think none of us really do, or else he'd go a lot earlier. But the upside's there. Ryan Tannehill's more than competent. I think it's going to be a great match.
All right, guys, in the 8th round of the FFWC Best Ball Video Showdown Draft, I took one of my favorite picks. It's clear if you watched me in the first 7 rounds, I kept bringing up this Bills stack I clearly targeted throughout this draft process. And in the 8th round, I take the running back. I take Devin Singletary coming off an RB24 season in terms of fantasy points per game. In the second half last year, down the stretch, when it mattered, Devin Singletary popped. He put on his best performance of his NFL career in this Bills offense. And yes, they drafted James Cook, but the reports are suggesting that the Bills are still, quote, firmly behind Devin Singletary in his backfield. Devin Singletary last year, despite sharing some time with Breida and some time with Zach Moss, he was still the number 17 back in weighted opportunities. Deceptively, number 12 back in red zone touches with 46, including 5 goal line carries. He also had the 24th most targets at the running back position. Devin Singletary, with the ball in his hands, could do a little bit better, 19th in true yards per carry, but pretty damn elusive, 13th in juke rate, 13th in evaded tackles, 7th in breakaway run rate, and 22nd in yards created per touch. Not great, but not bad either. Really middle of the pack with some upside packed in. New offensive coordinator in Buffalo, which means maybe they run it a little bit more since they found second half success behind Singletary, and that's what I'm really buying into. I love Devin Singletary in this spot, and I believe the Bills are going to continue to lean on Devin Singletary as their primary ball carrier in this offense. And if he stays healthy, in the 8th round, Devin Singletary can pay big-time dividends in this draft.
With pick 8-10 in the FFWC Video Showdown, Fantasy Football Diagnostics selects Tim Patrick, wide receiver of the Denver Broncos. I was hoping to get an Allen Lazard, a Tyler Lockett to really hold down this wide receiver 3 spot. But unfortunately, those guys I missed out on. I missed out on Russell Gage earlier. Would have loved to have a guy like an Elija Moore or Drake London to fill this void for me. So I'm settling here for Tim Patrick, who I do have down as wide receiver 37, so on the cusp of being a wide receiver 3. But I do get the ability here to stack him with my quarterback and Russell Wilson. So I know it's not a high-level stack in terms of, it's not Jerry Jeudy, it's not Cortland Sutton, but this is still an offense that I'm anticipating will throw the football more than we've seen Russell Wilson really throw it in the past. And so therefore, Tim Patrick seems like a ideal fit for me in this spot to be able to pair him with my quarterback. I do have him on the cusp of being a wide receiver 3, and I think he can have some wide receiver 2 weeks for me. And so hoping that he can help round out this receiver group, which is looking a little dry after just Justin Jefferson and Deebo Samuel. So going to have to get creative here throughout this draft.
With the 11th pick in the 8th round, the GOAT District selects Chris Olave. This was another wide receiver versus running back decision that we made. We considered Kareem Hunt here, but ultimately the upside of Olave was something that we could not leave on the table. We think he has the potential to be the #1 target in New Orleans. We think he has potential to be a top 20 wide receiver as a rookie. Olave has a lot going for him right now. Michael Thomas's health is unknown. Jarvis Landry is new to the team. It looks like Olave's season in New Orleans for years to come.
With the 12th pick in the 8th round, the Fantasy Down team selects quarterback Trey Lance of the San Francisco 49ers. Listen, best ball is all about ceiling, and who has a better ceiling than Trey Lance? He's got a great offense around him with Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Brandon Aiyuk. His mobility is also key to his success. We think he's going to be able to run around, get into behind this great offensive line that San Francisco has in a Kyle Shanahan-style offense and really excel this year. The team has already committed to him over Jimmy Garoppolo. We're willing to take the risk here in round 8.